tonight we've got some guests with us. So instead of having a sermon, we're going to be interviewing them. And it's been a real joy to have them with us all day. They were with us this morning with some of our DY team and alumni teaching, and they're here with us tonight. Many of you know Jonathan and Melissa. Helser, it's been such a joy to get to know you guys this week. I know Pete really loved chatting with you guys and getting to know you. You'll probably know of them through their music. They are songwriters, worship leaders. They've led at places like David's Tent and Big Church Day Out. And their songs have been streamed literally millions of times. But actually what they've given their lives to mostly has been discipleship. They're from North Carolina. They live in the woods, a little bit different to Hammersmith, different type of woods. And they have, for the last 18 years, sowed year in, year out into discipling, particularly 18 to 30s, having a discipleship school, retreats there, and are really committed to community. And it's actually out of that smaller, deeper, beautiful place of community and creativity that a lot of the songs that often we will sing have been birthed out of that. And so we really want to learn from them tonight, learn from their story, their walk with the Lord. As you know, we've been in a season of exploring what does intimacy with God look like. And we thought, who better to hear from you guys and just to draw from all your years of wisdom. And they have two children, Cadence, who's 24, and Haven, who's 20, who we met, had the privilege of meeting her when she came to visit in autumn. Cadence is getting married to someone who was in your discipleship school, which is what a great way to recruit a spouse for your son, okay? Let's just take you through an 18-inch journey and then we'll get ready. But yeah, their school is called the 18-inch journey. Some of you guys have been on it, some of you are going to do it, which is basically the distance between the head and the heart. And they're really passionate about us not just having head knowledge about God, but really affecting our heart and what we believe about him. So should we give them a really warm welcome as they come up tonight? So good to see you. This morning we had a bit of musical chairs, but I think you found your perfect seat. Guys, how are you finding London? How are you finding St. Paul's? How are you doing? You'd think
great.
You've not used one of those before.
I know, right? We're doing great. Hello, everyone. We're very happy to be here. We're finding London louder than the woods, but very precious. It's been really beautiful. Yeah.
And you guys are such an extraordinary church family. My daughter Haven was here in November, and she had the most amazing head-on collision with Jesus in this room. And when she came home, I could still feel the ripples of the presence of God that's here. And when I walked in this morning, I'm like, no wonder she loves this place. You guys are doing such an incredible job at hosting the Lord's presence, and being in worship with you twice now has been beautiful. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you for creating an atmosphere that changed my daughter's life. As a father, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. There's nothing greater than seeing my kids encounter Jesus. One moment in Jesus' presence can change everything, yeah? So thank you.
So good. Would love to hear a little bit about you guys, your story, and especially you, Jonathan. I wonder if you just share just kind of how you ended up, the full story for you becoming like a worship leader and a songwriter that I know begins with your dad coming to faith. I don't know if you'd be up for sharing that.
Yeah. Psalm 139 says that every day of our life is written in God's book. And I'll be 48 years old this year. And looking back at the story of my life, I'm just marvel at the way God writes stories. There's things we're doing with our life. If you would have told me when I was an 18-year-old, you're gonna be doing all these things, I would have never, ever, ever believed you. But my story started before I was born. My dad met Jesus smoking dope, doing yoga, and reading the book of Isaiah. He thought it'd be really cool to get stoned and read the Bible.
Sounds like our foundation course.
And Jesus pulled my mom and dad out of darkness into his marvelous light. They were both hippies, had done a lot of drugs, and never thought that they would have any more children. They had, I have two older sisters, 10 and 12 years older than me. And in 1975, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And through an old intercessor that was at church, they received this wild prophetic word that my mom was going to have a son named Jonathan David. The old intercessor didn't know that my mom was scheduled for surgery in 2 weeks. And he said, well, I think the church should pray for her one more time. So they prayed for my mom and the cancer disappeared. And 2 years later, I was born. And the other part of the prophetic word that I didn't know about the first 19 years of my life is that this old intercessor also said that one day I was going to write songs for my generation. And my parents wisely took that word and they just prayed into it. And guys, trust me, in my high school years as a teenager, they totally thought the prophet got it wrong because I was a crazy kid, getting into lots of trouble and never picked up an instrument until my senior year of high school. And I actually came over here to do a discipleship training school with YWAM when I was 19 years old, back in the 90s. Does anybody in this place remember the 90s? Yeah. You guys remember the 90s and Walkmans and cassettes? And well, I came over here to do a DTS with YWAM. And in those first couple months of the school, I wrote my first song. And about a month after I'd written the song, my parents came over to visit, and my dad got to teach at my school. And the last night he was here, a friend came over and put a guitar in my hand and said, you have to play your dad that song. And guys, I was so nervous. My dad is one of my musical heroes, and he's sitting like from me to you, and I'm holding this guitar just shaking. And when most worship leaders close their eyes, they're usually just nervous. And I was so nervous, but I kind of had to open them because I barely knew the chords of the guitar. And I sing him this first song I'd written. And as I got to the end of the song, he looks at me and he's got this raspy voice. He's like, son, who wrote that song? And I was like, I did, Dad. Is it any good? And guys, it was like when I confessed that I wrote it, like these tears just shot out of this old man's eyes. And this smile broke across his face. And he said, son, you have no idea how long I've been waiting to hear that song. And little did I know he had been holding a 22-year-old prophetic word that him and my mom had been praying into. And later that week, he shared with me, he said, 22 years ago, an old intercessor prophesied that one day you would write songs for your generation. And I was just completely astonished that this story that God had been writing started before I was even in my mother's womb. And about 2 weeks later, one of my favorite things to do was to get a Walkman. It was a cassette Walkman, and I would just walk the hills of the Midlands in the UK. And I would just walk, and I was learning how to find my song with God. I was finding God's smile for myself. And when it would get dark enough, sometimes I would just dance through the fields, trying to miss the sheep poo in different spots. But I was out there one night just like worshiping with all of my heart. And I love the worship moments when God interrupts our song with his song. And I'm just singing with all my heart out in the middle of this field. And I hear God say so clearly into my heart, you think your dad's been waiting a long time to hear you sing? I've been waiting since Eden to hear your voice. And for each one of us, God's been waiting. He's been dreaming about the sound of our voice. Isn't it amazing that our vocal cords are unlike anybody else's? They're completely unique. I distinctly know the difference between my son and my daughter's voice. And they can say my name in a way that pulls my heartstrings like no one else. And he's like, I've been waiting since the garden to hear you sing. So I would have never imagined that I would write worship songs, but that's how it started. It started in this nation. So thank you guys for giving me my first song. I'm very grateful. So it's an honor to have come back so many times and of getting to lead worship in this country.
It's such a beautiful, beautiful story. And then you guys got married. Do you want to say a little bit about that? You were 20. And then Melissa, just your journey also into songwriting and music, which is a bit different, but also really beautiful.
Very different. Jonathan and I met when I was 19. He was 20. 18 and 19, I guess. We got engaged at 19 and 20, married 2021, pregnant 21, 22, baby 22, 23. It was all very fast. And we got married young, had kids young, and it was wonderful. But before I had met Jonathan, I have a chronic illness. I had gotten diagnosed when I was 17 with a bone disease and a skin disease. And I had had a radical experience of healing when I was 17, 18 years old. And then I met Jonathan at a ministry school, and all of that happened. And after I had my first child, it all came back. And it came back pretty intensely, actually, where about 80% of my body was covered in psoriasis, and I was losing ability to use my hands. And it was starting to spread through my joints pretty severely. And during that time, so that was my early 20s, that we were both thrown into the fires of suffering. And we had both grown up in church. I grew up in what I affectionately call charismania. Just a lot of amazing, wild things that I grew up seeing. So I believed in healing with my whole heart, and I experienced it when I was 17 years old. But we were in a very tense place in our early 20s, and trying to, recall everything we knew to be true about the Lord. And it was really tough. And I didn't grow up in a musical family. We all played sport, kind of like you. I played soccer, football. You call it football, we call it soccer. And baseball, which you don't have, I guess. But so I was really into sport, didn't grow up singing, anything like that. But in my 20s, when everything got really bad, I would watch Jonathan go to the guitar or the piano, and he'd begin to play. And I would visibly see relief come over his mind, his body, his soul. And I would watch it and be like, man, Lord, I just need that kind of relief. And I just wasn't getting it. I was praying a ton, fasting, doing all the things. And I just decided to ask Jonathan to teach me how to play the piano, play some chords, so that I could start singing my prayers instead of just praying them over and over and over again. And what I experienced was that I actually could sing them and sustain this space of prayer in song much longer than I could just praying them. And relief came to my soul, like very deeply. And some of those first years, the songs that I wrote, probably no one will ever hear but Jonathan and my kids. It was such a sacred time of finding my voice in the middle of suffering and experiencing the love of God just coming so close and just bringing extreme relief to my soul. And it was really life-changing. And so I never wanted to be a worship leader. I never sought that out actually at all. But I think just that the unique contribution is that I found my voice in the heart of suffering. And it's definitely postured me in a really vulnerable place before the Lord that I treasure. I treasure it very deeply.
Can I ask, I think it's amazing, and you can hear it in your songs and your teaching, that you have these two stories of one, this amazing miracle of healing from cancer, this amazing 22 years, such a redemptive story of fulfillment. And then alongside that, unanswered prayer, suffering, questions. How do you guys live in the tension of those two things? And how do you follow God in the tension of that?
Such a big question. Didn't I start this morning? You should start
What you
tonight.
said was really good.
Was it? I don't remember. I'm a little tired.
Yes, how do we live in the tension? One thing that helped a few years ago that the Lord framed for us is without tension, these instruments can't sing. You remove the tension from that guitar and it can't sing. And it's being pulled by two forces, and the musician knows how to tune that instrument to the place where it sings. And part of the journey of trust, the journey of being fathered by God, is trusting that as he's tuning and he's stretching and he's pulling us in the pressure of marriage, pulling us in the pressure of parenting, pulling us in the pressure of unanswered prayer, knowing that God is a healer, and then being in the place of, where are you, God? And one of the pictures I love so much of Jesus is, Melissa shared to the discipleship year about it today, is that picture of Jesus at Lazarus' funeral. And this man loved his friend. And the evidence of his love is his face is not just one lone tear. His face is drenched in tears. And he has this, he's this paradox of like, he's drenched in tears and then all of a sudden resurrection is on his lips. Who is this God that weeps with us and then raises us from the dead? Who is this God that is a lamb that becomes the sacrifice for all the stupid things we've done? And then he becomes the lion that crushes the head of the enemy. And he's like this paradox he's the suffering servant and then he's the conquering king. And so learning how to trust him in the pressure. A few years ago, the Lord spoke to me when I was in a moment, and I was just, those moments where you just dare to get honest in prayer. I'm so thankful for the Psalms, because there's so much tension in the book of Psalms, yeah? Like every emotion, the highest high of a human and the lowest low. And I was in a place one morning just like, God, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And I'm just reading the Psalms, trying to find God. And the Lord just spoke in the middle of just a tense moment. And he said, the pressure is real, but my presence is greater. The pressure is real, but my presence is greater. And so I know I'll tag you in here, but it's just been such a gift to have a God that we can go and weep with, and then a God who lifts our heads, and then he raises things from the dead inside of us that we never imagined he could. And just living in that tension has produced a song in our lives that we could have never sang without the tension.
Yeah. I think that I'm grateful deeply for the privilege of walking through suffering, because it does create just a vulnerable posture. And if you can lean into it, it creates a softness in you that's so precious. You begin to fellowship with the Lord in that place. Not that I don't want to be healed, because I do. I pray for it every day. And I open my heart to it consistently. We were just this week with an evangelist, like healer guy. I don't know his name, but he's like seeing people raised from the dead and like tumors fall off of people's bodies and stuff like that. And at the end, he just said he called out some things for prayer, and he said for arthritis. And I stood right up. I'm like, Lord, if this is the moment, let's go. Like, I'm here for it. And then I hope, and then it's done. And then my deeper hope is in my friendship with Jesus. And so I think a lot about like because I'm gonna be healed on this side or that side. For me right now, it's irrelevant, because what I want more than healing is I want to be a friend of Jesus, and I want to be able to sit in tension, and I want to be able to honor the tension, and I want to be able to have real hope right? That like means something. And I can see that in my 20s, I told this story this morning, but I had a guy hand me a book at a meeting and said, God told me if you have faith and you read this book and you do what it says, then he'll heal you. And so I'm like in my 20s, so of course I went home and I did it. I read the book and I did the thing, and I saw him months later, and he said, did you read the book? And I said, I did. And he's like, are you healed? And I said, no, but my heart is good, And he's like, that's impossible. Like, did you read the book? Did you do what it said? And at that point, I didn't say this morning, but I told the discipleship crew, at that moment, I definitely wanted to hit this guy. So I was like, how insensitive, like, what do you mean? I didn't say that this morning though, but I definitely was like, wow, that was bold. But it sent me into a tailspin of like, I'm not doing enough. I don't have enough faith. Like what do I need to do to get God to do this thing for me? And I was sitting with a friend, and I was telling him that I was in a really bad spot, like really depressed. And I was a young mom, and everything was closing in pretty tight. And he looked at me and he just said, Melissa, is this season of your life producing fruit? And I said, well, I'm not healed, if that's what you mean. And he said, no, that's not the question I asked. I asked, is this season of your life producing good fruit? Is it producing love, mercy, perseverance, kindness, the fruit of the Spirit, the fruit that is eternal? And in my, I was probably 24, 25, and I just started sobbing at the table, and I was like, yes, it's producing that fruit. And he just looked at me, he's like, that's the most important fruit, Mel. Like, that your life would be an orchard, that you would grow the fruit of the Spirit. You're gonna be okay. And that definitely just marked our lives. Like, I wanna be a woman who plants orchards that my children's children's children can eat the fruit of. And orchards take time. Fruit trees take time. You don't plant an apple seed and the next day get an apple. It's a grind, and there's tension in growth, and there's tension in the fruit coming forth in our lives. And so I think that I can look back and just say that I just have loved the process of being a friend of God. Like there's a very deep tenderness in this room. I felt it this morning so strong. I walked in. I felt it at your house last night, like just the presence, the tenderness of Jesus. God, I feel it again right now. Like when I walked in, I was like, oh Lord, what's happening? I don't want to move quickly. When the Lord comes in his nature, his true nature, it's really important that we slow down to receive him. I'm just so grateful for my friendship with the Lord. And I know that everyone has a different opinion about faith and healing and all the things, but in my experience, the more I'm honest with God and the more vulnerability I bring to him, the more love I feel and the more care. And it's just the covering of God just comes over and over again. And so I'm grateful for the tension. It has produced literal songs, but the deeper songs, like no one will ever hear but me and the Lord. And I'm grateful for that.
So deep. I heard you share as well about how so much of discipleship is about asking questions, and sometimes we're asking the wrong questions. I don't know if you want to expand on that, especially, I know you said about in your 20s, you guys were really in the thick of it, and the questions you had were not going to help you get through. And I heard you talk about just a reframing of what are the right questions that if you hadn't have done, would you even be following the Lord? Can you talk a bit more into that?
We had a spiritual father in our early 20s that I'm very grateful for, said to us many times, he said, guys, don't ask the Lord why. Oftentimes that question doesn't get answered on this side of heaven, but you can ask the Lord a different question. And this question would be a better one. Lord, what do you want to be for me in this season that you couldn't be for me in any other season? He's like, that's a better question. And I think, I can look back and just like every season of our life has been marked by part of the nature of God. And it's been so beautiful to just feel like, I want to search for the right question, because when I say the right question out loud and it's met with a response, I'm just so glad I didn't settle. Like just the story I told before, the wrong question was, do I have enough faith? A better question was, is my life producing good fruit? And am I becoming a friend of God? Like that's a better question, and a question that brings a greater reward because it brings intimacy with Jesus instead of just striving in performance. And so I think we ask a lot of questions. We asked you a lot of questions. You asked me a lot of questions. And I love that, because I think that the posture of asking questions is incredibly vulnerable. And you posture yourself to say, I don't know. And to the Lord, to yourself, to others. And I think that vulnerable posture is, I've always experienced the Lord coming. Even if he doesn't answer it the way I want or answer it immediately, just the posture of saying, I don't have to know all the answers. It's better that I ask good questions. And I think as we've matured in the Lord and grown, my questions have grown. They have not gotten less or smaller. They've gotten bigger and more complex. And I think some of them I've been talking to the Lord about for years. And I hope that in my 50s, 60s, 70s, I'm still there, a disciple, a learner, a student of the person of Christ, that I'm asking questions.
Yeah, we've written so many songs from that question. God, who do you want to be for me right now that you couldn't be in any other season? And I remember probably at the height of Melissa's sickness, feeling as a husband, as someone who loves her with all my heart, like I adore my wife, but feeling so powerless. Like my prayers felt so ineffective. God in some ways felt so distant, although he felt so close. And I remember probably at one of the lower moments that I had, picking up the scriptures, and I had picked up the Message Bible. And I was just, Lord, who do you want to be for me in this moment? Because you feel so far away. Who do you want to be? And Eugene Peterson translates Lord of Hosts, God of the angel armies. And we have this little prayer room on our campus. And I went to the prayer room early one morning. And one of the things I love to do is just sing the Psalms to God. And I just opened up and just started playing a chord. And I was in this place of just absolute desperation. Melissa was actually going to the doctor the next week we didn't know, but a big breakthrough was coming. But that morning, I just saw in the Psalms, God of the angel armies. And I said, that's it. That's who you want to be for me right now. And I'm going to just keep singing that name over my wife. I'm going to sing it over my heart right now. I wasn't even trying to write a song. I'm just like, I want you to become this for me, God. Isn't it amazing? He inhabits the praises of his people. And I just started singing, you're the God of the angel armies, and you fight for us. That was the only lyric I had. God of the angel armies, you fight for us. God of the angel armies, you fight for us. And it was like an anchor I was just clinging to in the middle of a storm, like ravaging my own soul, of just watching my wife suffer. I remember coming home and I'm like, babe, he wants to be the God of the angel armies for us. And I showed her the beginning of a song that would be an anthem for us. Sometimes I think as songwriters, we're prophesying what we need in the next season of our life. And I was speaking, just like God said, let there be light, and his voice created worlds. I was speaking, this is who you are for me, God. And he's like, and I'm gonna show up like that. Like when my kids were little, they had ways of saying dad that would call certain parts out of me. When my daughter was like, Dad, I knew she wanted me to come be the judge between a fight that her and brother were having.
Yeah.
When my son was at the store on the Lego aisle and he's like, Dad, he wanted the provider to show up. There were moments where my kids had a bad dream at night and I heard them from their upstairs room, Dad! And I knew they wanted the protector. You've never seen a white man run upstairs so fast. The way they called my name pulled the nature of me out as a father. And I know on that day in 2007, the beginning of that year, when I said, God of the angel armies, he's like, that's my son. I have to step into their world now. And 6 months later, Melissa started a medicine and her body was completely clear. We went on our first date in 5 years where she wore a dress. And it was like he moved in. All the tension didn't disappear, but like massive breakthrough came. And I was like, wait, we've been singing for the last 5 months. You're the God who fights for us. And it was like as I broke my heart and prayed a really honest prayer, he invaded our world with his nature. And that's some of the way, like just so many songs have been born out of that place. And I think for me, Dallas Willard says, God's not so concerned in what we do. He's concerned in the person that we become. Because that's all we can take into eternity is the person that we've become. And so much of the journey for me is, because I'm a dreamer, I'm a visionary. Like I wanna control and fix things. That's where this suffering has just like unraveled me because I can't fix it and I can't be in control of it. But one of the questions that's changed for me is not, God, what do you want to do in my life? God, what kind of person do I want to become in my life? And as I give into the work of becoming that person, it's like all of a sudden fruit starts growing off my branches I never imagined. But we can be so obsessed in a generation of likes and plays. I can't imagine when I was a young worship leader, if I could look on YouTube and see how many plays my song got. It would have totally screwed me up in my 20s because I would have obsessed over the fruit, not the person I was becoming. And so just that question, God, not just what you want to do with my life, but what's the kind of person you want me to become with my life? And to, in the middle of those storms, sinking your roots deep changes everything.
That's so good. We have a lot of Gen Z here, and you guys, literally for 18 years, you've been discipling people in that season of life. What would you say are some of the biggest tools, the things, if we can give you one thing, you've already given us so many, but to that age group that you're like, oh, if you got a hold of this, if you realize this about God, what would it be?
I can go first if you want me to. I think discipleship is formed by the questions that are asked. They are the questions we ask God, but they're also the questions that God asks us. And I believe one of the greatest questions Jesus asked his disciples that changes everything when you answer this question is that moment, they're about halfway through their discipleship. Everybody in the discipleship year, wave at me. You're halfway through your discipleship year. They're about halfway through their 3-year school with Jesus. And it says he comes to this region called Caesarea Philippi, and he says to the disciples, who do the people say I am? And they're like, well, some say you're John the Baptist, some say you're Elijah. And then he's like, but I want to know who you say I am. And he points in their chest, he says, who do you say I am? And Peter steps up and says, you're the Christ, you're the Son of the living God. And that question, who do you say I am, I believe is one of the most important questions we get asked by God on our discipleship journey. Not just singing the lyrics on the screen. It's amazing to sing the lyrics on the screen. But breakthrough comes when you start singing the lyrics that are written on your heart. When you begin to discover who God is for you. A.W. Tozer says the most important thing about us is what we believe about God. And when we begin to heal our image of who God is, the image of who we are gets transformed. And so for the young ones in the room, I would just say, who is God for you? Not just the books you've read or the lyrics you've sung, but like for you. Who is the God of the angel armies for you? And find that name, find that nature, find that part who God wants to be for you. Because when Peter discovered that, like, it's crazy. He's given the keys of the kingdom. Like, everything that was given away in the garden is restored. And so much of my discipleship journey, there was a lot of years that I thought God was a really angry father. Now, I wouldn't have said that out loud. I would have been like, he's slow to anger and he's generous in love. But my actions revealed my beliefs. And I had moments of perfectionism. I had moments where my kids, I remember this one moment, my daughter was unloading the dishwasher as a little girl, and she broke a dish. And I got so frustrated. I didn't yell, I didn't raise my voice, but she could feel my frustration. And I remember watching the fear in her body as she felt my frustration. And it broke my heart. And I realized, I don't know how to show compassion to myself because I believe that's how God reacts to my mistakes. I believe when I'm doing stuff and I drop a dish, God is just frustrated. And over the next, it's probably been a decade of work, God began to heal that image of him as a frustrated father into a father who's slow to get angry, who's not annoyed with me. And as I begin to trade in these lies about God and then go, you're a father who enjoys me. You're a father who, you're not bothered by my prayers. You actually love to fulfill the desires of my heart. I begin to be a lot slower to get angry at myself when I made a mistake. And my kids have made a few mistakes since then. And just recently, I watch myself react to them in a completely different way. And I'm like, I'm not, the song we were singing, I don't walk the way I used to walk. I don't talk the way I used to talk. But guys, it's taken it's not going to take everyone a decade, but it took about a decade of looking at what God really wanted to be. And it began to change me from the inside out. As I begin to say, you're a really kind papa. That began to change me.
That was so good, babe. I think I would say practice. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice stewards confidence. And I think that when we can give ourselves the compassion that we deserve and we practice being humble, we practice forgiving, we practice kindness, we practice strength, we practice boldness, and we practice doing that conflict with your friend that you don't want to do, but you know you need to do, and you do it softly and with your heart open, like whatever it is, whatever the Lord is showing you. I just love practice. I mean, we really focus on it because for some reason, the longer you're in church, you think like, I just should have it and I should nail it. And I need to have this by now. And life just isn't like that. You think of like the best athletes in the world are still practicing. Not so that they can play the game perfectly, but so that they can show up confidently. Because there's so many variables, right, that are gonna happen. There's another team and they're all really good and they're all also practicing. And life is just, there's so many dynamics and nuances to life. And I think the more we practice these simple things, the more confident we are that we're gonna be okay and that we can trust the Lord and that he can trust us and that we can give our hearts in moments where we normally would withhold. But that all comes, people ask us all the time, how did you get to be so confident? Like practice every day. Like just show up for your life. I mean, I love thinking about that the Father trusted the fate of humanity into the womb of a 15-year-old girl. Like, it's reason to show up for just the occasion of our life, amen? Like, and to show up every day and to show up in humility and vulnerability and practice. Like and not do the toxic shame that says, I should have it by now, I should just have it. Because your whole life is one big practice. And the beauty is that if you look around you, everyone else is also practicing. And so the more grace you receive for yourself, the more you can give. And we do begin to live and look a lot more like the kingdom, more gracious, more merciful, more kind, more vulnerable when we practice.
And you guys, I mean, you could have, the last 18 years, you could have gone everywhere. You could have just toured and been aloof and in some great places. But you guys have stayed so grounded, living in community. Your team, your community, you say you've been with them 15 years, the same people. What have you guys learned about community and the gift of friendship and the discipleship journey? Because I presume you value it, the fact you're still there. But for us in London, it can be hectic. Life can be hectic. What's the value of community? What role has those relationships played and being grounded in that place played in your guys' journey?
Practice, practice, practice. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I mean, I would say that is what it's been. It's like, it's one thing to have a great idea of something you teach at a discipleship school, but then all the students leave and you have to grind it out with actual people at work, 40 hours a week. And then you decide, like, do I really believe this? Like, is this really true? And I think it's been very important to us to work it out with people and work it out in real relationships and do the grind of conflict and humility. It's such a grind, is it not? Like, just, it's not simple. And I think, I just love that we're coming to our late 40s. We're getting old, babe. We actually, I think we need glasses, guys. I think we need reading glasses. And I don't know whether to cry or laugh because it's so sad. I'm like, I'm only 45 and I can't read my Bible when it's dim. That was a total side tangent. But I am kind of grieving it, I suppose, if it just came out like that I need glasses. But I think there's just the space to practice. And what I found, people ask us this all the time, how in the world are you still like running with these people? And I'm like, practice. We've just made so many mistakes and owned them and repented and apologized on the daily if we need to. We're all committed to this work and it's really messy. But everyone is committed, we're not out here, again, aloof, away, and expecting them to do it. Like, we're all in it together, and it's been a massive gift because we can go. I mean, we had a big church this year. It was so fun. You're just leading worship for like 35,000 people, and it's wild, and it's just like, wow. And then like a week later, like, we're all back at the farm, and we're like mowing grass and like designing books and getting ready for a retreat or something like that. And we've had the unique privilege of actually really working out those relationships. It's been life-changing for us.
We had a dear friend say to us, we're found by a father, but we're formed in a family. You can see it. I love walking in this church and just seeing the father holding a son. And we're found by a father who runs down our road. And then he kind of steps back from the garden and he lets us be formed in family. And what that's looked like for us is when we were dating, I asked Melissa on one of our dates. We were actually engaged at this point. And I was like, babe, we're at this very romantic restaurant, head over heels in love. And I'm like, if we inherited a large sum of money and we never had to work, like, what would you do with your life? She's like, you're an internal processor. You've obviously been thinking about this. You go first. And I was like, I know what we would do. We would get a cottage on the coast of Cornwall or Scotland or Ireland. And our house would be a music studio. And we would spend our life feasting on love and music. And she's like, where is the community and the people? I'm like, no, babe, it's me and you. We'll make some people eventually, but it's me and you. And she's like, I think that's my version of hell. I was like, okay, what would you do? She's like, oh, we would buy a big house and we had started discipleship school and we'd have community living with us, just discipling year round. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's my version of hell. Let's get married and figure this thing out. So remember the tension, like you can't make music without tension. And I will say that Melissa has she has helped pull a pastor out of me, a discipler out of me, that if I would have just lived in that cottage, would have never come out. I was making music before we got married, and I know Jesus gets most of the credit, but I helped him pull a musician and a worshiper. There would be songs that you guys would have never heard from Melissa. I don't think if we hadn't been thrown in the tension of being, remember, found by a father, but formed in family. And so my charge would be as you sink your roots into community, be ready for the furnace of transformation. The fire's gonna get hot. There's gonna be some people who really annoy you. There's gonna be people who are the very opposite of you. But what if they're the people that are pulling the strings of your destiny so you can sing like you could never sing by yourself? And so I would say run into community, but be ready to die and live like you've never lived before. My dad told me when my son was born, he came and he visited the hospital. And he's like, son, to me, remember raspy voice, are you ready to die? I was like, wow, what a question, Dad. And I was like, I don't know. He's like, well, when God decided to have kids, he decided he would die. He's like, but if you die and you love this little boy with all your heart, you're gonna live like you've never lived. And there's that part of in the beauty, the marriage is brutal and beautiful. And it's caused me to face my shadow, but it's also woken up someone inside of me that I could never have been on my own. And you don't have to be married to experience that. There's community. Within community, the gift of it is, it wakes up the person that we could never be on our own. We're found by a father and we're formed in a family.
So good. Guys, should we show our thanks and appreciation to Jonathan and Melissa? You guys are you're truly amazing, and it's always, I was saying to a friend earlier, it's always a relief to meet people who you admire from a distance, and then you get up close and they're even better. But thank you for stewarding what God has done in your lives in the hard seasons, for stewarding it so well. When no one was looking, no one was cheering, because it's amazing the fruit that your lives offer. You can taste. We were talking about whiskeys and 15-year-old whiskeys, and you can tell what you guys have gone through with the Lord is deep. And then when you share, it's incredible. It's such a gift. But I wonder if you could pray for us. We've got time just to pray, to see what the Lord wants to do. So I don't know if you want to stand. I'm going to ask Jonathan and Melissa just to pray over us. I wonder if the band can come up as well. Because I really feel you guys have been speaking to us, but the Holy Spirit has been speaking as well, so strongly as you guys have been speaking. And would love continue to give space, for the Lord to meet with us.